This is definitely one of the more interesting projects, I would say, because James Gunn, he decided, I know I'm making a new universe, and it would probably make more sense for me to just start off fresh with completely new characters, completely new franchises. But he was like, I like working on Peacemaker. So we're just going to continue on with Peacemaker Season 2. And we're just going to say that it's a part of the DCU. That, of course, very confusing to a lot of people because Peacemaker Season 1 was a direct spin off of The Suicide Squad, which was very much a DCEU movie. Peacemaker Season 1, very much a DCEU show. So, how exactly is this going to work where Peacemaker Season 2 is set in the DCU, is very much a continuation of Superman? How exactly is all of that going to work? And I'm going to be honest, I actually think they did a really solid job of explaining it all. I won't spoil it, but pretty much immediately they address it. And I think they do it in a pretty reasonable and easy to understand way. I was actually legitimately impressed by how quickly I went, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. I'm not going to spoil how they go about explaining it, but this is the way that I am understanding canonicity within the DCU. The DCU have characters in it that are played by the same actors that played those characters in the DCEU. The Peacemaker of the DCU is not the same Peacemaker of the DCEU. However, these two characters have similar histories. Peacemaker in both the DCEU and in the DCU killed Rick Flag Jr. That is a canon event if we're going to use Spider-Verse terms. However, that does not mean that everything else that happened in the Suicide Squad is also canon to the DCU. You cannot assume that anything in the DCEU happened unless it gets brought up and addressed in a DCU project, right? So we know that that Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr. That's the only thing from the Suicide Squad that we can really consider as canon. So does that make sense, right? And like to be clear, this is not a new concept, right? I think a good example of this is Spider-Man. The Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man both had their Uncle Bens die. That does not mean that they are the same Spider-Man. And just because something happened in the Tobey Maguire movies does not mean that it's canon in the Andrew Garfield movies. I feel like I get it. I feel like Peacemaker Season 2 Episode 1 makes that fairly clear. That being said, I don't know that just a normal person who's watching the Peacemaker show is going to necessarily get that. I definitely do see a reality where a lot of people are confused. Now, beyond all the canonicity stuff, is the show good? Yeah, I think it is more of Peacemaker.